I never imagined the last drive from my own home would be in the passenger seat of my son's car. At 65, I had survived losing my husband, working double shifts for nearly 25 years, and raising my only son, Ethan, completely on my own. Every overtime shift, every missed vacation, every sacrifice had one purpose: to give him the life I never had. The little blue house at the end of Maple Street wasn't just a home. It was my husband's dream. Every brick carried a memory. Every room held a piece of our family. I believed one day it would become Ethan's, not because he demanded it, but because he loved it as much as we did. I couldn't have been more wrong, because the morning my son drove me away from that house, he wasn't taking me somewhere safe, he was getting me out of the way. "Mom," Ethan said without looking at me, "I really think this is the best place for you." I stared through the windshield. The large stone sign in front of the building read, "Silver Pines Senior Living, a nursing home." "I told you," I whispered, "I don't belong here. You'll have nurses around the clock." "I don't need nurses. You'll have friends." "I already have neighbors." "You'll be safer." Safer, that word again. Whenever people lie to you, they usually hide behind words that sound kind. His girlfriend Vanessa turned around from the front passenger seat and gave me a smile that never reached her eyes. "You'll love it here, Evelyn. We already decorated your room." My room? Nobody had ever asked whether I wanted one. Nobody had even discussed this with me. It had already been decided, without me. Two attendants rolled my small suitcase toward the entrance. That suitcase held everything Ethan had allowed me to bring: a few sweaters, my medications, some framed photographs. The rest of my life was still inside my house. Or at least I thought it was. Before I could step inside, I turned around one last time. "Ethan?" He sighed impatiently. "What is it now? Can I go home after a few weeks?" He exchanged a quick glance with Vanessa, then smiled. "We'll see. We'll see." 3 simple words, but I knew what they really meant. No. The automatic doors closed behind me. The sound echoed louder than I expected. It didn't feel like entering a new home. It felt like someone quietly locking a chapter of my life behind me. The first few days passed slowly. Most residents were kind. Some rarely had visitors. Others sat by the windows every afternoon, waiting for children who never came. Watching them frightened me. Not because they were lonely, because I was becoming one of them. Ethan visited exactly once. 10 minutes, flowers from the grocery store, a rushed hug. Then he glanced at his watch every 30 seconds. Vanessa never came inside. She waited in the parking lot, as though spending 15 minutes with the woman who had raised her boyfriend was somehow inconvenient. When Ethan stood to leave, I reached for his hand. "Would you mind bringing me my wedding album next time?" He hesitated. "I'll look for it. And your father's watch. I'll see if I can find it." His answers sounded rehearsed, like someone promising things they never intended to do. That evening I couldn't sleep, so I walked slowly through the hallway toward the common room. As I passed the reception desk, I heard laughter coming from the receptionist's television. A local lifestyle program was playing. Normally I would have kept walking. Then something on the screen made me stop. My house, I froze. There it was. The same blue shutters, the same white porch, the same maple tree my husband planted 30 years earlier. Only one thing had changed. A bright "Coming Soon" real estate sign stood in the front yard. My heart nearly stopped. "No," I whispered. "That's impossible." I hurried closer. The television showed drone footage of the property, while the host spoke excitedly. A beautifully renovated family home coming to the market next month. Renovated? I looked closer. The porch swing was gone. My flower beds had disappeared. Even my late husband's woodworking bench had been removed. It looked like strangers already lived there. The receptionist noticed my expression. "Beautiful place, isn't it?" I couldn't answer. My voice had vanished. Then the camera panned across the living room. Standing beside the fireplace were Ethan and Vanessa, holding hands, smiling, like they already owned everything inside. Vanessa laughed as she pointed toward the staircase. Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Then the realtor said the words that shattered whatever hope I still had. "The current owners have completely transformed the property." Current owners? I stared at the screen in disbelief. Current owners, how the deed was still in my name. I had never signed it away. I had never agreed to sell. So why was everyone acting as if my home already belonged to them? At that moment, I realized something terrifying. Ethan hadn't sent me to the nursing home because I needed care. He had sent me there because I was the only obstacle standing between his girlfriend and my house. And as I stood there in silence, the receptionist handed me a brochure she'd picked up from the desk. "You know," she said with a smile, "the open house is this Saturday." I looked down at the brochure. On the front cover was a photo of my own home. And beneath it, in bold letters, were the words that made my blood run cold. A new beginning starts here. Barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my husband, Robert, sitting on our front porch with a cup of coffee, smiling as he admired the home we'd spent 30 years building together. Then the image disappeared, replaced by Ethan and Vanessa laughing inside those same walls. It felt like someone had stolen my memories before they had stolen my house. By sunrise, I had made a decision. If they wanted me forgotten, they had chosen the wrong woman. After breakfast, I walked to the nursing home's reception desk. "Could I borrow your computer for a few minutes?" I asked. The receptionist smiled kindly. "Of course." My hands trembled as I searched the county property records online. The page loaded. I typed my address for several seconds. Nothing happened. Then the ownership information appeared. Owner, Evelyn Carter. I blinked twice. I read it again. Still my name. The house had never been transferred. So why was a real estate company advertising it? Something wasn't right. I clicked on the listing. The realtor's name appeared, along with a phone number. Without thinking, I dialed it. A cheerful voice answered. "Good morning, Harper Realty. My name is Evelyn Carter." There was a pause. "I'm calling about the house on Maple Street." "Oh, wonderful," the woman replied. "Are you a family member?" "Family member? No." "I'm the owner." Silence, complete silence. Then her tone changed. "I'm sorry, I own that house." Another pause. "Mrs. Carter, we were told your son had full authority to sell the property." My heartbeat quickened. "What authority?" "He said he was handling everything on your behalf." "I never authorized anyone." The woman suddenly sounded nervous. "Would you be willing to come by our office? I believe we need to discuss something important." That afternoon, Margaret arrived to pick me up. When I told her what I'd learned, she didn't look surprised. I had a feeling. "You knew?" "I knew Vanessa had been pushing Ethan for months." "For what?" "The house." Margaret gripped the steering wheel tightly. "She kept telling him they deserved a bigger life, and your house was the easiest way to get it." At the real estate office, the agent greeted us immediately. She looked uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Carter." She placed a folder on the conference table. "Your son brought these documents last week. Inside were copies of my property records, medical paperwork, old tax statements, even copies of my identification. Everything looked official. Except one page caught my attention. A document claiming Ethan had permission to sell my property. At the bottom was a signature. My signature. Only, it wasn't mine. I stared at it. The handwriting looked similar, but it wasn't mine. One tiny letter had been written the wrong way, a mistake only I would notice, because I'd signed my name the same way for over 40 years. "I never signed this." The realtor nodded. "I believe you." She slid another paper across the table. "This is why we never completed the sale." I looked down. It was a title verification report. There was a handwritten note attached. "Owner must appear in person before closing." Margaret slowly smiled. "So they couldn't finish it?" The realtor shook her head. "No. When your son realized we required the owner to appear personally, he stopped returning our calls." Relief washed over me. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. My house wasn't gone, not yet. But my son's intentions were clearer than ever. As we prepared to leave, the realtor hesitated. "Mrs. Carter, there's one more thing." She handed me a business card. "The person who paid for the renovations." I looked at the name. It wasn't Ethan, it was Vanessa. She had already invested thousands of dollars into renovating a house she didn't own. She had been so certain the house would become hers that she'd started spending money before the sale was even legal. Greed had made them careless. That evening, Margaret drove me back to the nursing home. Before getting out of the car, she looked directly at me. "What are you going to do?" I looked through the window toward the setting sun. For weeks, I'd been thinking like a frightened mother. Now, I needed to think like the owner of that house. "They wanted to erase me," I said quietly. "I'm going to remind them exactly whose name is still on that deed." Margaret smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." The next morning, I called an estate attorney. By lunchtime, every legal document connected to my property was under review. My emergency contacts were changed, my financial authorizations were updated, the locks on my house would soon be replaced, and one final appointment was scheduled for Friday morning. An appointment neither Ethan nor Vanessa knew anything about. It involved the county recorder's office, and a decision that would change both of their lives forever. As I hung up the phone, my cell rang. The screen flashed one familiar name. "Ethan." It was his first call in 8 days, I answered. His voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Hey, Mom, I've got great news." I think it's finally time to talk about the house. I smiled to myself. He believed he was still in control. He had no idea. The game had already changed. 2 days later, I asked Ethan to meet me at the house. Not the nursing home, not a restaurant, home. When his SUV pulled into the driveway, he climbed out wearing the same confident smile he'd worn his entire life whenever he believed he'd already won. Vanessa stepped out beside him, carrying a folder. Even from a distance, I knew what was inside. More paperwork, more plans, more greed. "Mom," Ethan called, "you look so much better. I've been worried about you." I smiled politely. "I'm feeling stronger every day." Vanessa glanced toward the front door. "Should we go inside?" "Actually," I said calmly, "I'd rather stay out here." The porch where my husband and I had spent countless evenings deserved to witness what came next. A black sedan slowly pulled into the driveway. Then another. Ethan frowned. "Mom, who's that?" The first car door opened. Out stepped my attorney. The second door opened. A county records officer followed. Behind them came Margaret. Finally, the real estate broker who had shown me the forged paperwork. Vanessa's confident smile disappeared. "What is all this?" I answered quietly. "The truth." The attorney placed a folder on the porch table. "Mrs. Carter asked us to be present while she clarified ownership of this property." Ethan laughed nervously. "Ownership. Mom already knows we're helping her." I looked him straight in the eyes. "No. You were helping yourselves." The silence that followed felt endless. The county officer opened an official file. "The public records confirm that the sole legal owner of this property remains." He looked toward me. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter." Vanessa immediately interrupted. "There has to be a mistake." "There isn't," the officer continued. "No transfer has ever been recorded. No deed has ever been executed. No ownership has changed. Everything they had been planning had existed only inside their own imagination." Then the real estate broker stepped forward. "I also need to correct something." She looked directly at Ethan. "You represented that you had authority to sell this property." We later discovered that authority had never been granted. Ethan's face turned pale. I can explain." "No," I replied softly. "You've had weeks to explain." I reached into my handbag and removed one photograph. It showed Ethan at 8 years old, covered in mud, holding the first birdhouse he had built with his father. "You remember this?" He stared at the picture. "Dad stayed outside all afternoon helping you. You were so proud," his eyes filled with tears. "I remember. I kept every drawing you ever made, every birthday card, every Father's Day gift you made for Robert." I took a slow breath. "I never imagined I'd also have to keep evidence against my own son." He lowered his head, unable to look at me. Vanessa suddenly spoke. "Ethan, say something." Instead, he remained silent, because there was nothing left to defend. Not after the forged paperwork, not after the realtor's testimony, not after the public records, not after the lies. My attorney handed me one final envelope. "Mrs. Carter, as requested." I opened it slowly. Inside was a revised estate plan. "I've made a few changes." I looked at Ethan. "I removed you as my financial representative. I removed your authority over my medical decisions. And I've arranged for this house to remain in a family trust that cannot be sold without my written consent." Vanessa's shoulders dropped. Every dream she'd built around my home vanished in a single moment. Ethan finally whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. For years I had wanted to hear them, but some apologies arrive only after people realize they've lost something. I looked at him with tears in my eyes. "I believe you're sorry. I just don't know whether you're sorry for hurting me, or sorry your plan failed." He couldn't answer because deep down he knew I was right. I walked toward the front door, then stopped. Without turning around, I said, "When your father was dying." He held my hand and asked me to promise one thing. He said, "Don't ever let anyone make you feel like a guest in your own home." I kept that promise. I unlocked the front door, walked inside, and gently closed it behind me, not to shut my son out forever, but to close the chapter where I confused love with surrender. Months passed. I moved back home. The porch swing returned. Fresh flowers filled the garden again. Every Saturday morning, neighborhood children waved as they rode their bikes past the house. Life became peaceful. Not because everything was perfect, but because I finally stopped allowing guilt to make decisions that wisdom should make. Ethan wrote letters. Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I didn't. Forgiveness came slowly. Trust came even slower. He would have to earn that. Just as every parent earns the title of mother, Every child must earn the privilege of being trusted. People often ask me what the one secret was. They assume it was hidden money, a second will, a secret bank account. They're always wrong. The greatest secret wasn't buried in a safe or hidden in a document. It was this: they believed my greatest weakness was my love for my son. But they never realized my greatest strength was finally learning that loving someone doesn't mean surrendering everything you've built. And the day I understood that, I didn't just save my house. I found myself again. The end?